Hi, I'm Aruna Miller, and I'm excited to be joining the director and the actors of the independent movie Mixed Up. It has been accepted by many film festivals, including Delaware's Women's International Film Festival. And I'm sure we're going to hear so many more accolades about this film in the near future. Mixed Up is written and directed by the talented Dr. Nishi Chawla. After teaching for nearly 20 years as a tenured professor of English at Delhi University in India, Nishi and her family moved to the United States and settled right in the Washington, D.C. area. She taught at the University of Maryland and is now on the faculty of Thomas Edison State University in New Jersey. Dr. Chawla holds a PhD in English from the George Washington University. She has also completed a 2-year postdoctoral study at the Johns Hopkins University. And most recently, Penguin Random House has just published her poetry anthology, Singing in the Dark. Congratulations, Nishi, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Aruna. Thank you, everyone.
Nishi, you are a writer, an academic, and an artist. You teach and you have published 6 volumes of poetry, 10 plays, 2 novels, and now you've just written and directed the film Mixed Up. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and the many hats you wear?
Well, Aruna, Mixed Up, yes, rightly so, is my first feature film that I've written and directed myself. I'm a playwright and poet and an academician reinventing myself as a filmmaker. I'd always wanted to become a writer from the age of 13 when my first poem got published in India. And I still consider myself an accidental academician, although I've taught for about 40 years or so. Now I've become an accidental filmmaker, maybe, owing to the pandemic. Yes, it takes much longer for poets and playwrights to get even an iota of recognition. And it has taken me 4 decades of working on my poetry and plays to achieve, any sense of recognition. So the struggles and challenges have certainly made me stronger. Um, when we were rehearsing and Zoom reading Mixed Up, we just kind of decided to turn it into a movie. With proper precautions, everything kind of masks and, getting ourselves tested, it did work somehow last year. This was last year when the film was shot in Potomac, Maryland. Well, my work has always been meant for a niche audience. This is a very slow moving, independent art film. My movie is also, like my poetry, slow and thought provoking. Mixed Up is a slow and poetic meditation on love and issues. It's set in the 1970s. Uh, and it's a composite of American, Indian, Iranian cultures. So,
No, thank you. You mentioned 4 decades. Yes, I think as individuals, as artists, whatever our profession may be, we continue to evolve and, hopefully give the best person who we are back to the world. And that's exactly what you're doing. So thank you for that. I have to tell you, Mixed Up personally resonated with me as I am part of a mixed marriage. Now, when my husband and I were married 30 years ago, you could say that we broke the mold on both sides of the family. Unlike Scott and Emma, the characters in your movie, our parents received our unity with great love and they accepted it immediately. But I know there's a lot of couples out there who don't face that same type of warmness and reception from whether it's the Indian side of the family or the American side or the Iranian side or the black side, whatever it may be. And I hope someday that we will be able to achieve that moment when I think one of your characters says, in fact, Scott says it, that, the vows you take is not vows of a race, but vows as human beings. So I hope we can get there. You mentioned the 1970s. So why did you pick this period? Is it because America had just been awakened by the Black Civil Rights Movement, which then, of course, prompted the passage of the Immigration Act to allow a new generation of immigrants to enter the United States, specifically South Asians? So, was there a reason why you picked this time period?
I don't know. I did not strategize to use that time period. My focus was only on writing a movie about intercultural love. And the second half of the film is set in the new millennium. So it could be the late 2020 or 2018. But so if you go back 40 years, then it's about set in the 1970s. So Mixed Up is an intercultural love story when a white American professor's daughter falls in love with a Hindu doctor, and the other daughter falls in love with a Muslim in the 70s. The consequences of the daughter's choices and decisions reflect on the complexities of racial prejudice, even in the changed landscape of contemporary romantic entanglements. I've always believed in a just and equitable world order. All of my work is about changing the hierarchical nature of this world. And in creating the movie Mixed Up, I hope the viewers will re examine racial and cultural differences. Uh, yes, of course, the incidence of interracial dating and what they called exogamous marriages has definitely gone up in the past decade or so. And of course, I don't know, you were truly blessed, in the 1970s, but a lot of my friends and colleagues have told me about falling in love with this person or that person. And it was kind of, it never went anywhere, their relationship, intercultural relationship. So the acceptance of such relationships is still fraught with complexities of social psychology and ingrained racial prejudices. Uh, in a kind of radical departure from my previous writing style, I've tried to create a poetic rendition of intercultural love, where I examine causal factors that make up romantic interracial relationships. The story reveals the deep seated hostility of a white American professor's wife to their two daughters' boyfriends, one a Hindu medical doctor and the other an Iranian Muslim. So the story exposes the consequences of the daughters' choices and decisions and the changed landscape of modern love, of course. Uh, as the United States becomes demographically more diverse, the issues of equity and justice and equal opportunity will become more important to more people. If diversity is a large term that embraces different things to different people, then my movie will make its own entry point to enlarging the definitional value of the term. I would imagine that a diverse audience would feel privileged to enhancing their understanding of the complex operations of the mind, so to say, and its clash with this modern world, as far as intercultural love is concerned. I hope this answers some bit of what you were trying to look for.
Oh, it does, Nishi. Thank you. No, it is beautifully displayed in the movie. The challenges, the difficulties of interracial, intercultural, interethnicity marriages, and I think even in modern day, there are many couples still facing this. And you talked about how America is changing demographics. By 2040, the country will be minority majority, right? So there will be no particular race that's going to be the dominant race, and you are going to begin to see a lot more of these marriages. So I think even from 30 years, they said now it's almost 17% of married couples are interracial or interethnicity. So Yeah, I think the more you see of this in movies like yours, the more you meet people that are in a relationship like this, it'll become much more normalized. So thank you for your work on that.
Mhm.
Now, one final question for you, Nishi. Your work, as you said, often includes hearing the voices and the hearing the voices of the marginalized and uncovering untold stories. So tell us about the next film that you're already working on, The Strange Case of Normalcy.
Uh, this is an entirely different experimental kind of movie. I wrote the screenplay about 2 years ago or so. I wanted to write about the mind and about mental issues which are somewhat invisible. The strange case of normalcy is a subtle examination of how each of us lives on the edge of normalcy while we construct an illusion of the normal by which we define ourselves. All of us strive to appear to be normal and pretend to be average and normal, even as the boundaries blur. Uh, so, in this, story, five ethnically diverse friends who graduate from an Ivy League institution consider themselves smart, normal. They are aware, though, of the fragile boundaries of the human mind. So the story unfolds how each of them experiences serious issues of isolation, suicidal thoughts, and how they live on the edge of time. In fact, one of the scenes focuses on an anxiety attack, sorry, that my actor does so powerfully. We are Zoom reading right now. It's an experience to be lived through. So I think it was well Alfred Hitchcock who wisely commented that drama is life lived, so to say, with the dull bits cut out. And so the strange case of normalcy deconstructs the idea of normalcy and perhaps brings in, the marginalized sides of our aspects of our mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishi. Well, I myself am so looking forward to seeing this movie, and I'm sure it'll be wonderful. So thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us. Next, I'm going to go to Tom Schiller. Tom, you played the legendary Winston Churchill in Nishi Chawla's play Churchill Among Savages, which examined Churchill's role in the former colonies of the British Empire. How does one prepare for the role of Winston Churchill?
Hi, Aruna, and Janet says hi. From my longstanding interest and expertise in military history and terrorism, counterterrorism, one tends to come across Winston Churchill a lot. Uh, so I'm pretty familiar. I was pretty familiar with a lot of what Winston Churchill stood for. Um, the most interesting, I guess, book that I encountered in preparing for this was a book called Churchill and Gandhi, which is kind of a parallel biography of the two of them. And it turns out that they might have encountered each other during the Boer War in 1903 or whenever it was, 18, whatever, where Churchill was a journalist who became famous as a result of being captured and escaping, while Gandhi led an ambulance corps of South African Indians. And they might have crossed paths at one of the more inglorious defeats of the British early in the war. Um, I think the modern assessment of Churchill, other than the hagiographic studies or the Churchill is the fiend of the colonies, is that Churchill was wrong about just about everything, be it the Gallipoli landings, putting Britain back on the gold standard in the 1920s when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, uh, the controversy over the Prince of Wales and his decision to marry a divorcee. But the one and in later years, decolonization, particularly pertaining to the independence of India. But the one thing he was right about was the threat of Nazi Germany and taking over as prime minister in 1940. And I think the argument would be that Britain would have probably made peace with Germany had Churchill not taken over at that time. So he's a very mixed figure in terms of preparation. I watched some of his speeches. I picked up the Homburg hat that he liked to wear, and was considering there's a British company that makes eyeglasses of the same type that Churchill wore, but between time and expense constraints, I didn't quite go that far. And tried to strike a happy medium between imitation and parody, I guess, when trying to devise a level of speech that would show I was Winston Churchill without trying to become Winston Churchill, and it was very challenging.
No, that's great. Thank you. So a lot of reading up, a lot of, like you said, parody, imitation. It's good to know. I imagine for any character, especially someone as epic as Winston Churchill, yes, that must have taken quite some time. But thank you for that. You did a great job in playing that role.
No, thanks.
Now, sure, and please do give my best to Janet as well.
Okay.
In Mixed Up, you play Scott, the reasonable, somewhat level-headed professor. Now, Scott is married to the xenophobic wife, Emma, and is the father of Brittany and Ashley. How is this character anything like you, different? Did you have to prepare for this as well, similar to what you did with Winston Churchill?
I think my perception of who Scott was I guess derived from the 1960s and 70s films like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner,
Yes.
and an expression before the Murdochs took over the New York Post. There was a term called New York Post liberal, which was someone who was all in favor of civil rights and integration and accepting African Americans into society, as long as they didn't marry your daughter.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, Scott, I guess, had very good intentions, but between being worn down by his wife and just getting fed up with it all, and essentially being weak in character, finally just gives up and says, it's more than I want to deal with. The family's going to give you lots of hassles, and I just don't want anything more to do with it, which my daughters see as a betrayal because I had previously always been very supportive of their aspirations and didn't really care who they married theoretically. So that's well-intentioned but weak, and married to a very dominating and xenophobic and alcoholic woman, and I think he just gives up.
Yeah, I remember watching that thinking, no, Scott, don't give up, don't give up. You got to push back on her. But yeah, that exactly what happens. And I think just in general in society, we need to be mindful of this and not to back off when you feel like things are getting overwhelming. If anything, that's when you got to push back, speak up, show up, stand up for what's right in society.
Well,
So
I guess Scott would argue that being married to who he was married to, uh, how miserable would he have to make his life?
I think we got to make it pretty miserable if it means pushing society in the right direction where it needs to be. I mean, people have died for fighting for their values. So yeah, I guess in this case, Scott would have to put up with the miserable marriage for a little while. But nevertheless, do you think that the movie will trigger or fuel the familiar debate on race relations in our country?
I'm not sure because there's really been so much. I'm hesitant to use progress, particularly in light of the events of last week. But things have evolved over the 30, 40 years between the 50 years now, between the 70s and now. Um, it was very unusual when I was growing up, and growing up in a very liberal enclave in Manhattan in New York, to see have to be aware of an interracial marriage. I mean, it was very exotic. One had to be careful not to, overdo it in terms of approbation, and because presumably the people wanted to be treated like normal folks. Um, but now, at least again, in the pretty liberal enclave in which we live, suburban Maryland, close to DC, it's not really that unusual. The other thing, I guess, is my milestone is when I was in high school, what kept me from getting beaten up a lot was my encyclopedic knowledge of racial and ethnic jokes. Um, and my kids didn't know what a racial or ethnic joke was when they were in high school. And I explained and gave a few examples, and they're like, that's funny. Uh, so I think society and culture has moved. One can certainly make the argument whether it's moved far enough or how much further it's going to go. And, none of us are completely free of prejudice. And one of the things about Nishi's film that struck me on watching it was that she addresses racism from people other than white folks, which I certainly encountered when I was living in Britain in the 1980s. A lot of my Arab friends had very unpleasant things to say about Africans, and some of my Iranian friends had pretty unpleasant things to say about Arabs. Um, so that it slightly goes against the grain of uh, the claim that all whites are have feelings of guilt, blah 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 blah. Um, so in terms of interracial marriage, I'm not sure how much it's going to move things in one direction or the other. Again, it's certainly enlightening because it covers racism from all points. But I think at this point, uh, what's more important than something that's beginning to get accepted more and more throughout the United States and certainly the world, parts of the world, is the institutional racism that has finally, knowledge of which is and perception of which has finally come to the fore. So, the movie accomplishes a great deal. Um, but I would have to suggest that there are other issues involving the races and racism that are of more immediate import, certainly economically.
Thank you, Tom. Now, you raise a good point that yes, biases, prejudice exists in any racial group or ethnic group, and something that we all need to be mindful of as we are throwing our own perceptions and ideas and judgments on other groups. So this movie, I think, does that. It shows that it exists on both sides. So I think that was a really important point to note there. And
Absolutely.
again, thank you for playing the part, Tom. You did a great job, and we look forward to more of your works in the future.
Thanks, Aruna.
Sure. Next, we're going to talk to Sanjay Kumar. Sanjay, I have to tell you, I'm already deeply impressed with the level of talent you have, which started right before this Zoom meeting. So thank you for all guiding me through and where we need to be here right now in the Zoom meeting. But Sanjay, more importantly, you play the role of Ali, the Iranian who falls in love with Ashley, one of the daughters of Scott in the movie. This was your first feature film. Tell us about what that experience was like.
First of all, Arunaji, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. I just do what I can, and I do not do what I cannot. I mean, that's how I live it. So appreciate that. Yes, this was my first feature film. I play the character of Ali, an Iranian American character who migrates to US as a young man, becomes successful, marries a white girl. So, I mean, he's living the American dream. Um, I have been an actor for many years now, and primarily in theater.
Oh.
And I've done some short films, but doing a feature is a more complete experience, to be honest. It was wonderful and a challenging experience. Just I've learned a lot being on a shooting set, extended cuts, or going through the iterations of repeating and being consistent in your dialogue delivery or your facial expression, being able to. So I mean, it was I would say an extended experience that I was lucky to have, and thank you, Nishiji, for the opportunity on that. They had multiple challenges. I mean, we are at a time when the circumstances produced production hurdles, or going from a regular Zoom meeting to a film shoot set on during pandemic, plus researching a character that I have never played. I'm not culturally close to them, so it's been a mix of challenge and a beautiful experience. I love acting, as most of my peers know. So to be able to think that, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? Let's research this, talk to the peers. I had a blast, honestly. I mean, I have to say that.
That's great.
Sanjay's, the detailed and painstaking research he did in turning over into an Iranian. He actually got a Farsi coach. All of that was so impressive. It was like, that's how you're supposed to, be an actor. Just, follow the path of excellence, the passion, the sense of excellence with which you do, big role, small role, minor, major. What is important is, just giving the best of yourself. And that's what struck me about Sanjay. So thank you very much, Sanjay, for coming forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's extraordinary, Sanjay. Now, I've heard from other actors that sometimes when they get into their part of playing a particular character, it's like so consuming that all of a sudden, after being in that role, it takes a little bit of time to step out of that role again. Did you experience that with this?
I would say so. I think acting, as most of my peers will say, for most other things that you do, you get tired you get tired intellectually and physically. Acting tires you even emotionally, because you do a lot to feel that actor, to feel that moment. And whether it's crying or whether it's feeling sad or feeling elated or feeling upset about things. So it's not a switch. I mean, we are all human beings. For us to intensely go inside a character, live it, on the movie, of course, it's nicely edited, cut and all of that. It feels good as a story, but a lot goes into trying to get into that character. I mean, at home, my family usually says that, Dad or Sanjay has changed his ways. Maybe there's a new role coming. And it starts off early, and I start doing that all the time, kind of, sort of, and it sticks with you because it's not something that you can just give away, which you have done for months and months. So no, I have to agree. It goes deep emotionally. You have to feel some. It won't be exactly the same to bring that persona out, bring it to the surface, or at least be convincing. I mean, it's a make believe that we are doing anyway as actors. So I have to agree with the fact that it stays with you. It takes time for you to shrug off, or at least move on, or distract yourself into something else.
But I think that is the sign of a great actor, because I have to tell you, Sanjay, when I watched the movie and you were playing Ali, I really thought you were Iranian. So when the credits rolled up, I was looking for a Iranian name to come up, and I didn't see it. And I'm like, where's that character? And then I was told by Nishi, no, Sanjay Kumar actually plays that role. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he did a fabulous job. And I got to tell you, you have some really good dance moves there too. I don't know if you hired a dance teacher for that, but that was great as well.
Well, I'll credit Lucy for that. And, if I didn't have a partner like that, I wouldn't have been to do that. But no, thank you. That's a compliment. I mean, honestly, because I have been fearful of sounding not, how shall I say, natural. My points of references were few. That's definitely a compliment to say that if I sounded Iranian till you saw the credits.
Seriously, take it as a compliment, but it's the truth. I really thought you were Iranian in that character and was really surprised when I learned you weren't. So fabulous job. Thank you so much, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to be talking with Lucy. Lucy Bond, you have acted in Nishi Chawla's Churchill Among Savages, much like Tom Schiller. In Mixed Up, though, you played the rebellious daughter, Ashley. So let me ask you, how different is it working in theater versus working in film?
Oh, it's so different. I honestly, I didn't know what to expect. And because this was kind of new, I think some people had some small film experience, but it was Nishi's first film, Sanjay's first, well, he had a little bit, but it was so new for all of us. So we were all kind of like baby birds, not knowing what to expect. Once we got there, though, the people we worked with, they did a great job explaining this is how it's going to be different. This is what we need from you. This is what we expect from you. Like they kept telling me to not be so loud. I'm just a natural projector. And then when I'm in my acting mode, it just happens because I've been doing it for so long. They kept being like, quiet, stop, like yelling.
No, that's great. Now, I know the character, Ashley, she's quite combative with her mom, which I loved. She drops a lot of F-bombs and, really is out there pushing back against her mom. So how did you prepare for that role of Ashley?
Well, I mean, the younger Ashley was not as hard as the older Ashley because, that was much more of a leap. But I mean, I'm definitely very strong-willed. I don't think I have been quite so rude to my mother, but I'm not gonna lie and say that I've never had a disagreement with her that has gotten very emotional. So yeah, it wasn't and just she really does feel like she's right. And I remember being a teenager, and it's kind of subsided in recent years of being a teenager and just thinking like I know everything. And I think she kind of thinks that. And she is probably more right than her parents in this way, since, they're kind of hateful, her mother at least. So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't too hard.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I know the film took place in the 1970s, but now here we are in 2021. You're young, have a lot of young friends. Do you, see any of this, I guess conflicts when you see interracial or interethnic couples? I mean, I got to believe it's much more widely accepted now, but I don't know. Tell me.
Well, definitely more widely accepted. And I think like my generation, we're getting so much better, I think, at talking about race and culture. Like there's this idea, and even the older Ashley uses it. She talks about being colorblind, and like today, we don't want to be colorblind because we want to see these beautiful different cultures, and we want to see how, race affects your identity. We don't want to be blind to that, like everyone's the same, because no, everyone's not the same. Everybody is valuable, and all these different, your cultural traditions, your heritage, all of that has value. And I think like seeing those differences and also really respecting them and creating space for those identities to be, accepted and feeling safe. That's something that I think my generation talks a lot about. and ideas that are just like just more nuanced than maybe generations prior.
Sure, sure. Now, Sanjay talked a little bit about, him being Indian, but playing an Iranian character. Now, you're a 20-something person, but you had to play a 60-year-old later on in the movie. So how did you prepare for that transition?
I mean, that was definitely the most challenging thing, and especially it would have been easier on stage because you can be a little bit more dramatic, but with film, like, you're right up there. So that was something that definitely caused me some anxiety. But some of the older cast members were like, okay, you're talking way too fast. You need to lower your voice. You need to slow down. You don't have this energy anymore. You gotta like chill. And then also just like Sanjay and I, we started rehearsing in person, like the 2 weeks prior, and that definitely also helped. Just it's so hard to establish relationships over Zoom, really, and then just I think kind of working with his energy and mine kind of helped us find a balance of like what these two people's relationship is like, and that helped me get into that character too.
Sure. Well, thank you, Ash. Thank you so much, Lucy. You did a great job playing Ashley. And again, I look forward to more performances from you, whether it's in theater or in film.
Thank you.
Sure. Last but not least, we will be talking to Rohini Veer. Rohini, you play the role of Raj's mother. Now, do you believe her reaction to her son marrying a Westerner is true to the views of modern day South Asians?
Um, a lot has changed since the 70s. When I was a young girl, I actually grew up in that culture, and I've seen many couples live, unhappy marriages because they were forced to adjust in the families where they were married into. There were all kinds of reasons of caste and race. Although there's still a lot to be done, but the society has changed and it has evolved since then. So today, I personally don't see my daughters going through anything like that, or they are more educated, sensible, open. But not all South Asians think the same way. For still a lot of youngsters, for men, women, the pressure to marry into the caste is, or within the community, is still very real.
Sure. As you say, not all South Asians are like them. Most hopefully are evolving that, it doesn't matter what caste, what religion, what ethnicity you're from. So again, I thought you were so beautiful and classic playing that role, and really true to the part of a concerned mother, Indian mother, not necessarily agreeing with all she's saying, but you really played that beautifully. So thank you for that great performance.
Thank you.
And now I understand that your part was actually filmed in Toronto and not Potomac, Maryland. So what was that like?
It was my first experience working virtually, and it was a lot to get used to doing your rehearsals or readings virtually through Zoom. And like Lucy said, that connection with the character was the energy was little. Uh, a challenge to come through, but it all worked out in the end. And because of the lockdown, we had a lot more time to rehearse and give it my best. And it was quite an experience, but well worth it.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Now, Rohini, how did you get into acting? Is this something that you've always enjoyed doing? Did you start in school or as an adult? Tell us a little bit about that.
This is, I was never really, a drama person, but at some point when I was in college, I had, an exposure to modeling and do some commercial ads at that time. And that was about it. So now when I moved here to Toronto, took it up as a hobby, as a second career. I did some acting classes uh, and even online courses. I even do or look up a lot of videos even now. And since I've registered with an agency, I do a lot of auditions, and and not everything works out. But now it has actually become a second career for me.
That's wonderful. Acting skills are so important. I myself, I'm in the political atmosphere, running as a representative and so forth. One of the most important advices that an individual gave me was that the most important class she ever took, and this was an elected official, the most important class she ever took in college, she said, was an acting class, because in acting, it teaches you how to speak well, articulate, use your whole body as part of the language as well. And you know that public speaking is one of the biggest fears for most people. In fact, they've said that when Americans were surveyed, what are your biggest fears? They said death and public speaking. When they were asked, which of the two are you more fearful of? They said public speaking. So that means at a funeral, Americans would rather be in a casket than be given the eulogy. So this is how, it's so important. Acting skills are not just for actors, but people of any profession, to be able to articulate what your message is and so forth. So thank you again for sharing that story with us. Thank you to everyone who did this phenomenal job in the movie Mixed Up. Dr. Nishi Chawla, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Aruna.
Absolutely. So again, great movie, and I encourage everyone to watch this. There's so much to learn about our society through this movie. And thank you again to everyone, the actors, and to the director and writer.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.